Welcome, my soft-thinking listener. You've found yourself in the company of the Sleepy Sloth once again. A slow, scientifically minded fellow, who enjoys the gentle art of cleaning cloth, and things that rub, soak, or drift quietly in water. I must tell you something before we begin. Today, I consider myself a scientist in the very slow, deliberate, and remarkably unexciting history of laundry practices. A scientist who is almost always correct, except for those few times when I am not. But even then, I prefer to drift gently onward, rather than fuss over it. Because what truly matters is the information itself. Before I start, please, let me know. What is the most boring thing you would secretly love hearing about? Let me know gently. In the comments. In the soft, sun-baked banks of the Nile, around 3000 BC, the Egyptians developed a habit so mundane it nearly drifts entirely from memory. They would immerse their garments in the cool, slow-moving waters of the river, allowing dirt, sweat, and small particles of sand to drift languidly from fibers. The water was not heated, for the sun's gentle warmth was considered sufficient. They would knead the cloth carefully, by hand, pressing and lifting in repetitive motions that, while unremarkable, removed many tiny residues. Imagine the water, slightly silted, carrying away specks of ancient dust, while the hands of a laborer or perhaps a servant pressed the linen softly against one another. This process, water rinsing, required patience, for each garment demanded attention, one piece at a time. But first, a slow little detour. For this extra interesting fact. The Nile's seasonal ebb and flow provided varying mineral content, which subtly affected the texture of fabrics, leaving them slightly softer in some months and perhaps a touch more brittle in others, though no one asked for such a fact, and yet, here we are, observing it carefully, softly, and with measured interest. Let us float gently onward to 2500 BCE, in the lush floodplains of the Indus Valley. There, the practice of friction washing emerged, a method so unassuming that one could almost forget its existence. People scrubbed garments upon smooth stones or flat wooden boards, applying repeated pressure, rubbing one side against another, in order to dislodge dust, mud, and body oils. This method involved a peculiar rhythm, the back-and-forth motion almost meditative in its simplicity. Each stroke, while utterly unremarkable, was precise, as uneven scrubbing could leave marks or patches of lingering grime. You may not care. And that is completely fine. But it is fascinating to consider the subtle differences between types of stone or wood used, each contributing, in minute ways, to the effectiveness of the cleaning, though such distinctions are nearly invisible and often ignored by all but the most patient observers. The garments, once scrubbed, would be rinsed in nearby waters, sometimes with additional manual pressing, to coax remaining particles away. And now, drifting further, we reach Mesopotamia, around 2000 BC, where the first semblance of soap appeared. Lye-based substances, carefully concocted from the ashes of burned plants combined with animal fats, were rubbed into fabrics. These early soaps, harsh by modern standards, nonetheless allowed cloth to shed oils and odors with a slow, deliberate efficacy. Each application demanded attention, spreading the lye mixture evenly across threads, and then rinsing it gently, again in water drawn from rivers or streams. The texture of the cloth, the slightly alkaline scent, the subtle change in softness, these were all minute, precise details that few noticed at the time, and yet, they quietly mattered. It is in these small, unexciting motions that civilization quietly attended to cleanliness, one garment at a time. As we drift softly into Egypt again, around 1500 BCE, where alum began to be appreciated not for its taste, or its medicinal properties, but for its ability to brighten fabrics, particularly those whose whites had dulled in the sun or from repeated rinsings. Applied carefully to cloth, the alum drew faintly on mineral action to restore brightness, a slow alchemy of sorts, imperceptible to the casual observer. Each sprinkle or solution bath required patience, as the chemical interaction between alum and fibers unfolded at its own unhurried pace. One could stand by, perhaps in a shaded courtyard, and simply watch garments gently steep and respond, noticing little changes in hue and texture that took hours to manifest, though most might never register them at all. These ancient methods, repetitive, quiet, and astonishingly unremarkable, reveal a slow, meditative care for cloth, and for the tactile minutiae of everyday life, a form of attention almost too gentle to describe fully, yet undeniably present, and profoundly calming. Around 1200 BCE in China, a method emerged so quiet and unassuming that it might easily drift from memory, though it left a subtle imprint on the slow evolution of cleanliness. People discovered that mixing fine ashes with water created a gentle, natural detergent, capable of coaxing dirt and oils from woven fibers. The ashes, often collected from wood or plant matter burned in slow fires, were measured with careful attention, for too much could abrade delicate threads, and too little barely touched the soil clinging to the fabric. Once combined with water, the mixture became a soft, gray paste that it could be worked slowly into the cloth, pressing gently with hands or paddles. The act of rubbing the paste into fibers required patience, a rhythmic, meditative motion that must have seemed almost like a quiet dance of fingers and water, each thread receiving minute, deliberate attention. After scrubbing, the fabrics were rinsed repeatedly, often in calm, shallow basins or trickling streams, until the water ran nearly clear, the slightest sediment settling to the bottom, unnoticed by all but the most attentive observer. Some scholars note that the mineral content of the ash could subtly affect the texture of the fabric, leaving threads slightly more resilient or, in some cases, marginally more brittle over repeated washes. No one asked for these details, and yet, here we are, gently exploring the tactile intimacy between ash, water, and cloth, imagining the soft gray paste being spread, pressed, and released, each movement as slow as a drifting feather in a quiet forest glade. The process, simple yet remarkably detailed, speaks to an ancient mindfulness, a meditation on cleanliness woven into daily life, almost invisible in its elegance, and entirely calming. By 1000 BCE, various cultures across ancient lands employed a method both tactile and surprisingly quiet, beating clothes against rocks. This practice, although seemingly blunt, relied on careful rhythm and observation. The fabrics, soaked and softened, were draped over large, smooth stones or laid flat against jagged surfaces, and then tapped, pounded, or struck with measured force. Each impact encouraged the release of dust, sand, and residual grime that had embedded itself during wear. The repetition of the motion, while entirely ordinary, created a subtle, hypnotic cadence, a kind of gentle percussion that seemed to echo slowly through time. Observers, if any lingered nearby, might have noticed the soft splashes of water or the faint movement of fibers rising and falling under each gentle blow, almost like a slow, controlled breathing of the cloth itself. This technique, practiced for hours, demanded patience and consistency, for uneven or rushed strikes could leave stains unremoved or fabric fibers strained. Interestingly, some records suggest that this method varied depending on the type of textile, with coarser fibers tolerating stronger beats and finer linens requiring more delicate attention. As the cloths were lifted and observed, small clouds of water droplets and dust would drift upward, a quiet mist settling onto sun-warmed rocks, unnoticed by those not paying very close attention. One can imagine the soft repetition of stone and hand, a tactile ritual both mundane and infinitely detailed, revealing the patient intimacy humans shared with fabrics long ago, a slow, drowsy diligence. Almost like watching gears turn in a forgotten, mossy workshop. In China, around 800 BCE, clay became an unexpected companion to water in the careful art of washing fabric. Miners of gentle earths and household practitioners alike discovered that clay, when combined with flowing water, formed a subtly abrasive paste that could both clean and slightly whiten textiles over repeated use. The clay, sifted to remove larger particles, was chosen for its fineness, each grain tiny, almost imperceptible, yet collectively capable of affecting the surface of woven fibers. Mixed with water, the mud-like mixture was applied slowly and methodically, pressed and spread along threads, worked into corners and folds, until the fabric had been thoroughly attended to. Rinsing was then crucial, often in calm, shallow basins, allowing sediment to settle softly to the bottom, while water carried away loosened dirt. The delicate balance between enough scrubbing to clean and too much friction that could damage the fibers was an unspoken skill, a quiet art, honed over time by patient hands. Some practitioners may have noticed the subtle softening or brightening effect, though this was secondary to the primary purpose of removing impurities. The visual of soft gray or beige clay slowly vanishing into flowing water, leaving behind smoother, lighter textiles, might appear almost ceremonial if one were to observe it with prolonged attention. This practice, unexciting to the casual eye, nonetheless embodies a thoughtful interaction with natural materials, each movement deliberate, each pause measured, an ancient rhythm that whispered patience and quiet care into the mundane act of cleaning cloth. Greece, around 500 BC, witnessed the steady, unhurried use of flowing streams to rinse fabrics after washing. Unlike the addition of special substances, this method relied on the continuous movement of water to remove soap, dirt, and residual materials, a natural, self-perpetuating process. Fabrics were submerged, lifted, and pressed slowly, the hands guiding each piece gently through the stream, allowing currents to draw away particles without force. The sound of running water, gentle and repetitive, may have served as an ambient backdrop, a subtle, lulling accompaniment to the meticulous motions of cleansing. Different streams, with varying mineral content or speed, could subtly affect the cloth, softening fibers or leaving them just slightly more taut. Observers might notice the small whirlpools of floating lint or sediment that spun away quietly, disappearing downstream with almost imperceptible grace. Rinsing was repeated until the water, for the most part, ran clear, a visual confirmation of completion, though in truth, no clarity could ever be absolute, as traces of dirt might remain unseen. This practice, simple yet remarkably patient, cultivated a tactile intimacy with water, fabric, and time itself, and even the smallest details, the angle of the wrist, the careful fold of the cloth, the gentle submersion, contributed to a quietly mesmerizing rhythm. Each repetition, unexciting as it may seem, forms a meditation in motion, an understated dialogue between human hands, woven fibers, and endlessly flowing streams. In Rome, around 400 BCE, a most subtle transformation in fabric care involved the use of wine vinegar during rinsing, a practice both soft and deliberate. The acidic liquid, applied in measured amounts, acted as a gentle softener and mild bleaching agent, altering fibers in the most understated fashion. Clothes, previously scrubbed and rinsed, were immersed in vinegar solutions, the hands guiding them slowly, pressing and releasing in repeated, unhurried motions. Vinegar, diluted with water, would permeate threads and subtly affect color, particularly whites, leaving them marginally brighter without any abrupt change. The smell, faintly tart, lingered as a quiet companion to the visual and tactile sensation of smoothened fibers. The chemistry, though unnoticed by most, was precise, acidity altering the binding of mineral residues and softening the overall texture, though the effect took its own gentle pace to manifest fully. Some accounts note that repeated vinegar baths might have contributed to slightly more flexible cloth, or in rare cases, a faint crispness along folds. One might imagine garments suspended in shallow basins, drifting softly under slow currents, while tiny ripples carried dissolved substances through threads, each motion incremental, yet cumulatively effective. This gentle practice, ordinary yet intricate, reveals a mindful attention to seemingly trivial materials, emphasizing patience, subtle interaction, and the quiet care humans have long bestowed upon their textiles. In Egypt and Rome around 200 BC, the use of soap derived from wood ash quietly shaped the way fabrics were attended to, in a manner both subtle and methodical. The ashes, typically obtained from burned hardwoods, were combined with animal fats or oils, producing a rudimentary soap capable of loosening grease, soil, and lingering stains from woven cloth. The process of making this soap required attention to detail. The ratio of ash to fat influenced the pH and effectiveness, and the mixture needed to be stirred and occasionally left to settle before it could be applied. When gently rubbed into dampened textiles, the soap worked to emulsify oils and pull dirt away from fibers, a slow chemical interaction occurring almost imperceptibly with each patient stroke of the hand. Observers may notice the faint change in texture, as roughened fibers became slightly smoother, or the subtle darkening and lightening of areas where the soap concentrated, though these effects were gradual and understated. Afterward, fabrics were rinsed repeatedly in water, sometimes running, sometimes still, ensuring that residues of ash and fat were removed without harshly abrading the material. One might imagine the scene: shallow basins catching sunlight, hands moving rhythmically, suds dissipating softly into water, and the faint aroma of wood smoke lingering in the air. Each moment, though quietly mundane, was part of a meticulous attentiveness to cleanliness, a tactile dialogue between soap, water, and cloth, performed slowly, deliberately, and with a kind of patient meditation, nearly invisible in its precision, yet profoundly calming. By 1 CE, in Rome, the ingenuity of water-powered fulling mills transformed wool care into a mechanical meditation. Water wheels, turning with steady, patient rotation, provided power to large hammers and stampers that rhythmically pounded wool fabrics. The action of these mills accomplished two essential functions: it removed residual oils and dirt, and it thickened the wool, causing fibers to mat together slightly and become more cohesive. The millwrights, having designed the timing and weight of the hammers with careful precision, ensured that the pounding remained gentle enough to avoid tearing delicate threads yet firm enough to produce a noticeable effect on the texture. One can imagine the steady splash of water, the soft, repetitive thump of hammers, and wool slowly compressing under each rhythmic motion. Streams of clean water were often integrated into the process, washing away loosened dirt and creating a subtle mist that lingered around the structure. Though the mechanics are unremarkable by modern standards, they reveal a quiet sophistication, humans observing and directing a natural force to accomplish the slow, exacting work of cleaning and finishing cloth. The very predictability of the mill's operation, the gentle repetition, and the patient interaction with wool fibers imbued the mundane act of washing with a hypnotic calm, a slow choreography of water, wood, and thread, as steady and unhurried as turning gears in a mossy, abandoned workshop. Around 200 CE in Rome, the collection of urine for bleaching wool might appear curious, though it served a precise chemical function, providing ammonia to remove impurities and lighten fibers. Urine, often gathered and allowed to ferment, developed a concentration of ammonia that, when applied carefully, penetrated wool and encouraged the removal of oils, residues, and natural coloration that would otherwise persist. Workers would soak the wool in vats or basins of this solution, pressing gently to ensure the liquid reached all fibers, sometimes agitating it lightly to encourage even bleaching. The odor, faintly acrid, was a quiet companion to the soft texture of damp wool pressed slowly under human hands. Over time, the ammonia reacted with residual fats and proteins in the fibers, producing a gradual change in hue, the color of the wool subtly brightening, though no sudden transformation occurred. After soaking, the textiles were rinsed thoroughly in clean water, gently pressed to remove moisture, and sometimes laid out in shaded areas to avoid harsh sunlight, which could stress fibers. Observing this practice, one notes the methodical patience required. Timing, concentration, and even distribution were crucial, transforming what might seem like an unappealing technique into a meticulous interaction with chemical principles, human touch, and natural materials. Each step, slow and repetitive, contributed to a quiet mastery of fabric care, a practice of attentive, almost hypnotic labor, quietly resonant like floating feathers drifting across a still pond. By 500 CE in Europe, manual beating and soaking remained the primary means of cleaning fabrics, a method both tactile and deeply rhythmic. Large basins or troughs were filled with water, often cool and gently flowing, and fabrics were submerged, left to soak until fibers softened sufficiently to release clinging dirt. Once pliable, the textiles were lifted and beaten against wooden paddles, or pressed by hand, encouraging the detachment of dust, mud, and accumulated oils. Each movement, though ordinary, required patience and consistency, for insufficient soaking rendered beating ineffective, while excessive force risked stretching or damaging the fibers. One might imagine the repetitive sound of soft flax against wood, the gentle plop of fabric entering water, and small droplets rising and falling like mist in a quiet courtyard. Different fibers and cloth types responded uniquely. Linen required a lighter touch, while coarser wools tolerated firmer impacts. Over repeated sessions, the tactile interaction between water, hands, and fabric created a slow, meditative rhythm, a quiet dialogue between human intention and material response. Even the smallest detail, the angle of a wrist, the timing of a lift, or the slight bend of a paddle, contributed to subtle changes in texture and cleanliness, unnoticed to a casual observer, yet entirely significant. This practice, unremarkable as it seems, reflects a deliberate patience and a focus on the unnoticed minutiae of care, a soft meditation performed in the gentle cadence of everyday life, as tranquil and detailed as moss settling over stones in a quiet forest glade. In China around 800 CE, horsehair brushes became a preferred tool for dusting and cleaning delicate fabrics, introducing a gentle precision to textile care. These brushes, made from fine, soft horsehair, allowed practitioners to remove loose particles without the abrasive friction of hands alone, a subtle innovation for the protection of intricate weaves and embroidered textiles. The hair was chosen for its flexibility, tapering to delicate points capable of reaching threads within folds or along seams, and attached to handles that allowed slow, careful movements over fabric surfaces. Dust, lint, and fine debris were brushed away in measured sweeps, each stroke slow enough to observe the faint cloud of particles rising and settling, yet deliberate enough to maintain progress. Some fabrics were so fragile that only the lightest pressure could be applied, each hand guiding the brush with almost imperceptible adjustments. Occasionally, practitioners would shake the brush gently to remove accumulated dust, allowing the fibers to remain soft and clean. The act of brushing, repeated and unhurried, created a quiet cadence, a sensory awareness of texture, resistance, and surface imperfections, which demanded patience and mindfulness. One can imagine the soft movement of hands and brushes over linen or silk, the faint whisper of hair against threads, and the imperceptible dust drifting in slow arcs through the air, all forming a silent, calming choreography, a subtle celebration of careful observation and the delicate interplay between tool, fabric, and touch. By 900 CE in Europe, the application of lime water to linens provided a gentle and precise method for whitening fabrics, a process both chemical and meticulous. Lime, derived from slaked calcium, was dissolved in water to create a faintly opaque solution, into which fabrics were carefully immersed. The solution penetrated fibers slowly, interacting with residual oils and pigments, subtly brightening the material without harsh abrasion. Fabrics were often left to soak for extended periods, the hands occasionally lifting and folding them to ensure uniform exposure. The texture of the cloth responded gradually, fibers became slightly stiffer at first, then softened as repeated rinsings removed lime deposits. The translucent, pale liquid reflected light softly, creating a visual rhythm as textiles were moved through it, each fold and submersion a quiet, meditative act. Observers might notice the gentle ripples, the faint sediment settling to the bottom, and the slow, incremental change in color, imperceptible in a single glance but cumulative over time. Such a method required patience, careful attention to the concentration of the solution, and a mindfulness of the fabric's tolerance, ensuring that the linens achieved desired brightness without degradation. This practice, precise yet understated, embodies a deliberate attentiveness, a slow communion with natural materials, and a meditation on the unhurried rhythms of care, as soothing and detailed as watching slowly turning gears in a moss-covered workshop, where each motion contributes quietly to an enduring, gentle effect. In the gentle rhythms of Europe around 1000 CE, soap began to take on a quietly deliberate form as workshops emerged, arranging vats and stirring mixtures with a patient cadence that seemed almost meditative. These spaces, modest yet purposeful, held animal fats and alkaline substances derived from wood ash, melting and blending with slow attention to texture and consistency. Stirring continued for hours, allowing subtle chemical reactions to occur, producing a uniform, soft soap suitable for washing delicate garments. Poured into molds, the mixture hardened over weeks, developing a solidity that invited careful handling. Families would then apply the soap to dampened fabrics, rubbing and kneading with a quiet rhythm that harmonized hand, cloth, and cleansing agents. Over time, repeated washing not only removed oils and dirt but subtly altered fiber texture, smoothing threads or occasionally introducing slight stiffness if overused. The scene unfolds gently in imagination, the muted scent of ash and tallow, sunlight warming bars of soap, and hands moving with deliberate, patient grace, performing a quiet choreography that transforms a simple act of cleaning into a meditative communion with materials, rhythm, and time. Drifting forward to 1100 CE, European laundresses relied on lye from wood ash, a substance extracted carefully from sifted ashes and water, creating a gentle yet chemically effective solution for wool and linen. Fabrics were submerged, the alkaline water penetrating fibers slowly, loosening grime and softening threads in a rhythm both steady and unhurried. Hands pressed, rubbed, and folded cloth, ensuring every seam and crease absorbed the solution evenly. Concentration, temperature, and soaking duration all required subtle adjustment, a slow negotiation between material and medium. Afterward, rinsing in fresh streams removed lingering alkali, leaving fibers slightly softened or, in some cases, gently roughened, depending on repeated exposure. The pale liquid flowing over textiles, faint ash scents mingling with water, and quiet motions of hands evoke a hypnotic cadence, a patient dialogue of human touch, chemistry, and patience, transforming the mundane process of washing into a meditative, almost ritualized experience. By 1200 CE, water mill fulling offered a mechanical, gentle persistence to wool processing, where flowing streams turned hammers or stampers that rhythmically pounded dampened fibers. Each strike compressed, aligned, and cleansed wool while currents carried away oils and debris, producing thicker, more cohesive material. Operators adjusted force, timing, and spacing carefully, ensuring fibers were neither torn nor unevenly compressed. The combination of water, motion, and repetition produced a soft, almost ceremonial cadence, steady splashes, gentle thumps, mist rising from compressing wool. Seasonal variations in water flow subtly influenced the process, a delicate interplay of nature and human design. Observing this method is akin to watching slow-moving gears or soft mist drifting over moss, a tactile, visual, and auditory meditation on rhythm, material, and patient care. During the 1300s in Europe, starching garments became a methodical way to impart structure and assist cleaning, as plant-derived solutions slowly penetrated fibers. Cloth absorbed the translucent liquid gradually, molecules settling into tiny crevices, reinforcing threads while subtly smoothing surfaces. Fabrics dried under careful observation, weight and moisture stretching threads gently, sometimes followed by pressing to achieve uniform stiffness. The faint aroma of cooked starch mingled with tactile sensations, creating a meditative, multisensory process. Textiles transformed incrementally, soft and limp at first, gradually firming without sacrificing pliability. Attentive focus on concentration, timing, and technique allowed subtle mastery, revealing a quiet chemistry between plant solution, water, and fiber, a rhythm as soothing as sunlight on moss or feathers drifting lazily in still air. In the unfolding domestic landscape of Europe around 1400 CE, wooden washboards brought fabrics into contact with slow, deliberate friction. Wet cloths were pressed and rubbed along ribbed surfaces, lifting dirt gently while preserving fiber integrity. Each stroke, faintly audible, created a soft rhythm akin to ripples over moss-covered stones. Laundresses adjusted pressure with quiet attention, lighter for delicate linens, firmer for coarse wool, guiding folds and seams with meticulous care. Rinsing followed in basins or running water, progressively removing loosened particles. Repeated cycles softened fibers subtly while achieving cleanliness, forming a meditative choreography of cloth, water, and hand, a sensory cadence both visual and tactile, unremarkable yet profoundly soothing in its repetition and attention. By the mid-1400s, the widespread use of soap bars made from tallow and ash brought a standardized, gentle method to household fabric care. These solid bars allowed slow, soft lathering on damp cloths, lifting oils and dirt incrementally. Hands pressed and kneaded fibers, ensuring thorough penetration before rinsing in fresh water, leaving garments cleansed yet subtly changed in texture. Repeated use could smooth or slightly stiffen threads, effects noted only by attentive observers. The gentle friction, quiet lathering sounds, and drifting water droplets evoke a meditative rhythm, a calm choreography of touch, chemistry, and repetition. This ordinary, unassuming ritual underscores human attentiveness to textiles, a patient, sensory engagement with materials and processes performed slowly, quietly, and with deliberate care. Along the slow-moving rivers of Europe around 1500 CE, communal washing unfolded with a gentle, unhurried rhythm, as villagers gathered to immerse garments in flowing water. Clothes, dampened and folded carefully, were pressed, swirled, and rinsed in the current, each movement producing subtle ripples and quiet splashes that mingled with the soft ambient sounds of birds and wind through reeds. Dirt, dust, and accumulated oils loosened gradually, carried away by the patient stream, while hands and arms performed a tactile choreography that balanced pressure with care. Observers might notice the slight changes in color or texture as fabrics interacted with water, the occasional sparkle of sunlight on wet threads, and the faint scent of river flora mixing with worn linens. Each garment received meticulous attention, ensuring folds and seams were thoroughly cleaned, while the communal nature of the activity created a slow, social rhythm, murmured conversations, laughter, and gentle guidance blending with the task at hand. Over repeated immersions, fibers softened, dirt was displaced incrementally, and the act of washing itself became a quiet meditation on time, repetition, and material responsiveness. The river, patient and steady, carried both water and the results of careful human attention onward, a moving mirror of rhythm and subtle transformation, as if nature itself participated in the gentle, unhurried choreography of cleanliness and tactile engagement. In the landscapes of 1520 Europe, linen garments were often taken to nearby rocks for beating, a practice of deliberate percussion intended to dislodge stubborn dirt. Each fold and hem was positioned against smooth or slightly roughened stones, then struck with hands or wooden mallets, producing soft thwacks and faint echoes that accompanied the slow release of grime. The tactile feedback, resistance under palms, subtle vibrations, and minute shifts in fiber alignment, offered continual guidance to the washer, informing pressure and positioning. Linen, composed of long, durable fibers, responded gradually, loosened particles floated away in dust or water, and the fabric slowly regained a brighter appearance through patient repetition. Between strikes, cloths were occasionally lifted and rotated, allowing air and moisture to circulate evenly, while small puddles of river water or collected rain softened fibers and facilitated further cleaning. Observers might note the faint sheen of damp linen, the muted sound of rhythmically striking fabric, and the quiet choreography of hands, stone, and fiber, a meditation in motion repeated day after day. Over time, the process not only removed surface dirt but subtly altered the feel of the linen, softening edges and aligning threads, a tactile, sensory evolution achieved in slow, deliberate care. The entire scene, though mundane and easily overlooked, embodies a patient engagement with materials and method, a rhythm of quiet effort and transformation as gentle as sunlight filtering through moss-dappled stones. In 1550 China, the use of boiling water introduced a gentle heat into the cleansing of heavier textiles, a method both practical and deliberate. Large cauldrons or kettles were brought to near boiling temperatures, then partially cooled to a manageable warmth before immersion of fabrics, ensuring fibers were not stressed excessively. The water's heat loosened oils, soil, and residue with a patient efficiency, aided by slow agitation with hands or paddles. Fibers responded gradually, swelling slightly as they absorbed water and then releasing trapped impurities into the liquid, which carried them away when changed or drained. The faint rising steam, diffused in soft curls above vats, mingled with the earthy scent of wet fibers and plant additives occasionally added for fragrance or softness. Observers might notice gentle folds of cloth moving in undulating motions, the tactile sensation of submerged threads yielding slowly to manipulation, and the muted gurgle of water interacting with the dense fabrics. This process required careful attention to timing. Too brief and grime remained, too long and fibers risked stress or shrinking. The act, repetitive and unhurried, became a quiet, meditative rhythm, with steam, water, and tactile feedback forming a soft sensory orchestra, transforming the mundane act of cleaning into a patient, deliberate engagement with textile, heat, and human touch, as subtle and soothing as watching moss ripple under a gentle breeze or a slow feather drift in still air. Across Europe by 1600 CE, laundry routines often combined soap with hot water, merging chemical and thermal assistance in a rhythmically slow process. The soap, rubbed directly onto damp cloths, produced gentle lather, and as water was added, fibers gradually absorbed the cleansing solution. Hands pressed, kneaded, and lifted garments in measured motions, ensuring penetration of soapy water into seams, hems, and folds. Over time, dirt loosened incrementally, rising into the water and eventually carried away by careful rinsing. The warmth of the water softened fibers, permitting subtle stretching and smoothing, while the faint aroma of soap and heated textiles lingered in the air, accompanying the quiet, repetitive cadence of manual washing. Observers could notice the incremental change in fiber texture, the slight darkening or lightening of damp threads, and the tactile feedback guiding each motion. This combination of soap and thermal immersion created a patient dialogue between chemical action, heat, and human touch, producing clean fabrics through a slow, deliberate choreography. The process, unexciting yet intricate, transformed ordinary washing into an attentive meditation on materials, rhythm, and subtle sensory cues, echoing the unhurried, delicate patterns of floating feathers or gentle sunlight on slowly turning gears, as each motion contributed incrementally to the gradual purification and softening of cloth. By 1620 in Europe, the use of plants like soapwort introduced a gentle botanical intervention for delicate fabrics, a method both slow and subtly precise. Fresh or dried leaves and roots were steeped in warm water to release saponins, natural compounds that provided soft cleansing without harsh abrasion. Fabrics were immersed carefully, fibers absorbing the liquid gradually, while hands stirred or pressed garments with light, attentive pressure. The process released minute dirt particles while preserving fragile weaves, allowing threads to remain aligned and intact. The pale greenish or amber liquid, sometimes tinted by leaves, moved slowly through fibers, carrying loosened debris away. Observers might detect the faint, earthy scent of vegetation, the quiet undulation of cloth in water, and the soft tactile response guiding each careful movement. Timing, immersion depth, and gentle manipulation all required patience, as overexposure could saturate fibers unnecessarily, while insufficient contact left soils behind. Over repeated sessions, fabrics emerged subtly cleaner, fibers softened, and delicate embroidery or lace maintained structural integrity. This practice embodies a quiet harmony of plant chemistry, water, and tactile attention, creating a hypnotic, meditative rhythm akin to soft mist curling through moss or the imperceptible, steady turn of wooden gears, as human care interacts with gentle botanical processes to nurture, cleanse, and preserve textile over time. In 1650 Europe, wooden paddles were employed to agitate laundry in tubs, a methodical practice combining repetition, leverage, and tactile observation. Dampened fabrics were immersed in water, sometimes combined with soap or natural detergents, and paddles were moved slowly, pushing, lifting, and pressing the textiles in gentle arcs. The rhythmic motion encouraged dirt to loosen and rise into the liquid while fibers were massaged subtly, maintaining alignment and integrity. Observers might note the soft splash of water, the faint scent of wet fibers, and the sound of wood against fabric, each element blending into a quiet cadence. Attention to paddle angle, pressure, and repetition ensured even cleansing without stressing threads, while repeated immersion and agitation gradually produced cleaner textiles. This mundane interaction between hand, wood, water, and fiber became an almost hypnotic meditation, a slow choreography of forces applied with care. Each movement reinforced cleanliness while providing tactile feedback, forming a sensory loop of touch, sound, and motion, soft enough to feel like watching gentle light filter over moss or drifting feathers, a quiet, patient rhythm harmonizing materials and human attention into a slow, deliberate process of fabric care. At the dawn of the 18th century, communal ponds in Europe served as social and practical arenas for laundry, offering expansive, shallow waters where multiple households could wash garments simultaneously. Cloths were soaked, rubbed, and occasionally pounded or pressed, allowing the water to carry away loosened soils gradually. Each person contributed to a shared rhythm, footsteps, splashes, and whispered guidance merging into a soft, auditory tapestry. Fabrics, gently moved through shallow water, absorbed and released moisture slowly, enabling cleaning and slight fiber realignment. The visual impression, damp textiles floating, sunlight reflecting off ripples, faint debris dispersing, added to a sensory meditation, where repetition, human touch, and water interacted in slow, hypnotic harmony. Attention to individual garments, seams, and folds required patience, as thorough cleaning emerged only over repeated cycles. This communal engagement, while ordinary, created a deliberate rhythm, a combination of tactile observation, quiet social interplay, and patient immersion in water, reminiscent of soft, drifting feathers or moss rippling under a gentle breeze, a soothing, unhurried choreography of human care and natural materials. In 1720 Europe, the manual wringer press introduced a subtle mechanical assistance to laundry, allowing hands to compress water from fabric gradually and evenly. Rollers were operated slowly, fabric guided carefully through their narrow gap, releasing moisture without undue stress on fibers. Each rotation, gentle yet deliberate, formed a quiet, tactile rhythm, hands adjusting pressure and timing in response to the pliability of cloth. Observers might notice the subtle sheen of damp textiles emerging from the wringer, the soft creak of wood, and the slow, measured repetition of motion, creating a meditative cadence. Fabrics retained shape and softness, while excess water was efficiently removed, preparing them for subsequent drying or treatment. This seemingly mundane tool exemplifies the interplay between human touch, mechanical assistance, and material response, producing a quiet, hypnotic process of attentive care, rhythmic enough to lull the mind as sunlight glances off slowly turning gears or moss-covered stones, each rotation reinforcing cleanliness and gentle maintenance of textile integrity. By 1750, starching linen in Europe involved patient preparation of plant-based starches, often derived from wheat or rice, and careful application to freshly washed fabrics. Cloths absorbed the solution slowly, molecules settling within fibers, reinforcing structure, and imparting subtle stiffness. Garments were air-dried or pressed gradually, the weight of water and starch stretching threads gently. Observers could perceive incremental change, limp linen firming without losing pliability, surfaces smoothing, and folds holding form. Subtle aromas, tactile sensations, and slow visual transformation combined into a quiet meditation, where attentive, unhurried care guided the interaction between starch, water, and fiber. The process, repetitive yet delicate, exemplifies a gentle communion with materials, rhythm, and observation, as calming as sunlight filtering through moss or feathers drifting in still air. In the quiet households of Europe around 1780 CE, the introduction of refined soap crystals brought a subtle transformation to the slow, methodical practice of laundry. These small, translucent fragments dissolved readily in warm water, releasing gentle cleansing agents that could penetrate fibers with a patience that ordinary soap sometimes lacked. Fabrics were immersed carefully, hands moving slowly through the solution, kneading and lifting cloths to ensure even contact. As the crystals dissolved, they produced a clear, faintly shimmering liquid that softened fibers while gradually lifting oils, dirt, and residues from threads, leaving a barely perceptible trail of suspended particles in their wake. Observers might notice the gentle shimmer of liquid, the faint, clean scent of the dissolved soap, and the quiet rhythm of hands pressing, folding, and swishing damp textiles in repeated, unhurried motions. Attention to concentration, water temperature, and timing guided each gesture, producing a gradual, almost imperceptible improvement in cleanliness and texture. The process, though mundane in the eyes of most, encouraged a meditative engagement with material and method, the soft, slow dissolution of soap crystals into water, the tactile feedback of submerged fibers, and the subtle visual cues of progressively cleaner threads. Each moment reinforced a patient choreography between human care, chemistry, and fabric responsiveness, a gentle interplay reminiscent of sunlight diffusing through mossy groves or feathers drifting lazily in still air. Over repeated use, fibers emerged softer, threads aligned, and garments subtly renewed, demonstrating how an ordinary innovation quietly enhanced the long-established rhythms of attentive, tactile, and unhurried textile care. In the early decades of the 19th century, around 1800 CE, hand-cranked washing machines began appearing in Europe and the United States, offering a modest mechanical assistance to the otherwise slow, repetitive motions of laundry. These devices consisted of a tub or basin, often wooden or metal, filled with water and soap, with a crank-operated agitator or drum. Clothes were placed inside, and gentle, repeated rotation or churning encouraged dirt to loosen from fibers in a gradual, almost hypnotic rhythm. Hands guided the fabric, ensuring that seams, folds, and hems received contact with the moving water, while the soft, tactile feedback of cloth pressing against paddles or blades informed the operator of cleanliness. The motion was deliberate, not rushed, producing subtle splashes and a faint, soapy scent that mingled with the air. Observers might notice the faint glint of water catching light, the steady creak of wooden mechanisms, and the measured cadence of hands turning cranks, all blending into a meditative ritual of slow, attentive care. Over time, repeated agitation improved both cleanliness and fiber alignment, softening threads while gently dislodging oils and soils, a quiet harmony of human effort, mechanical movement, and water's patient action, reminiscent of a slow feather drifting over moss or sunlight glancing on softly turning gears. By 1820 CE in Europe, copper boilers became central to laundry practices, introducing a thermal method for sanitation and fabric cleansing. Large vessels of polished copper were filled with water and gently heated to near boiling, providing both heat and reflective surfaces that diffused light across the room. Fabrics were immersed carefully, absorbing warmth slowly, while operators stirred or pressed garments to ensure even contact. The heat encouraged oils and residues to release from threads, sometimes aided by alkaline additives, and steam rose in soft, curling wisps above the boiling liquid. The gentle hiss and shimmer of water, combined with tactile engagement of fingers moving through fibers, formed a quiet, meditative cadence. Over repeated immersions, garments became cleaner and slightly softened, fibers gradually relaxing under thermal influence. The process required patient attention to timing, temperature, and immersion depth, each subtle adjustment affecting the gentle rhythm of cleaning. This practice, while entirely ordinary and unexciting to most, exemplified a slow, sensory harmony between heat, water, and human observation, echoing the quiet drifting of feathers or soft sunlight illuminating mossy textures, a serene choreography of thermal, tactile, and visual interaction in domestic fabric care. Around 1830 CE in the United States, the invention of rubber hand wringers introduced a refined, tactile method for removing water from fabrics, a small yet significant enhancement to traditional wringing. Rubber rollers, mounted between wooden frames, allowed cloths to be pressed and guided through with measured force, releasing moisture while preserving the alignment and integrity of fibers. Hands directed garments slowly, adjusting angle and pressure, noting subtle changes in pliability and dampness, while the rollers turned with a soft, almost imperceptible squeak and friction. Observers could imagine the faint sheen of wet textiles emerging from the wringer, the quiet, rhythmic action of hands and rubber interacting, and the small droplets of water tracing gentle paths to basins below. This mechanical aid encouraged a patient, repetitive cadence, allowing the tactile sense to guide each motion and subtly improving both efficiency and care. Over time, repeated wringing with rubber rollers reduced excess water while maintaining softness, producing fabrics more responsive to subsequent drying or finishing. The scene evokes a meditative interplay between mechanical ingenuity, human touch, and material responsiveness, a quiet, unhurried ritual, much like the gentle, steady drift of sunlight across moss or the imperceptible rotation of slow-turning gears. By mid-century, around 1850 CE in Europe, soda ash, or sodium carbonate, began to be used as a detergent additive, softly altering the chemistry of water to aid cleaning. The compound, dissolved slowly into tubs or basins, softened hard water, reducing mineral interference and allowing soaps and alkalis to act more effectively on fibers. Fabrics were submerged, hands moving gently to ensure each thread received contact with the solution, while small dirt particles detached incrementally and floated in suspension. Observers might notice the subtle glimmer of dissolved soda crystals, the faint scent of alkalinity mingling with wet fibers, and the quiet rhythm of fingers pressing and kneading threads in a slow, attentive choreography. Over repeated cycles, fibers became cleaner, softer, and more pliable, while residual mineral deposits were minimized. The practice, though mundane and ordinary, exemplifies a meditative, tactile engagement with chemical assistance, a quiet, unhurried orchestration of human touch, soluble compounds, and the slow, patient responsiveness of textiles, echoing drifting moss, soft feathers, or gentle sunlight on turning gears. By 1860 CE in the United States, wet washboards had become standard tools for scrubbing fabrics, a continuation of centuries-old tactile methods now slightly refined for efficiency. Wooden boards, dampened and placed within tubs, provided ridged surfaces against which garments were pressed and rubbed with deliberate rhythm. Each motion dislodged dirt gradually, fibers responding to repeated contact, while small waves of water and suds reflected light faintly. Hands guided the cloth carefully, adjusting pressure to accommodate coarse or delicate materials, producing a slow, meditative cadence of sound and touch. The process, repeated consistently, allowed for subtle softening and alignment of threads, incremental cleansing, and the satisfaction of observing incremental change. This tactile engagement, ordinary as it may seem, formed a hypnotic, rhythmic ritual, a quiet interplay of motion, material, and observation, as soothing as drifting feathers or the slow, steady glint of sunlight on mossy surfaces. In Europe around 1870 CE, mechanical fulling machines, powered by steam or water, offered a more forceful yet still measured method for processing wool. Large hammers or presses moved rhythmically, compressing, cleansing, and aligning fibers in a steady cadence, while dampened wool absorbed water or detergents gradually. Operators adjusted force, timing, and spacing with attentive care, ensuring uniformity without damaging threads. Observers might notice the soft, repetitive thump of machinery, the subtle rising mist, and the gentle movement of compressed fibers, forming a quiet, meditative rhythm of tactile, auditory, and visual cues. Over repeated cycles, wool emerged denser, cleaner, and more cohesive, demonstrating the interplay of mechanical energy, human oversight, and material responsiveness in a slow, hypnotic choreography reminiscent of drifting sunlight or moss-covered stones. By 1880 CE in Europe and the United States, large-scale commercial laundries emerged in cities, creating organized, collective environments for cleaning fabrics on an industrial scale. Rows of tubs, rollers, and steam-powered machinery moved close slowly and methodically, hands attending to folding, sorting, and guiding garments through repetitive motions. Water, steam, and soap worked gradually on fibers, removing soils, softening threads, and producing clean textiles with consistent texture. The faint hum of machinery, rhythmic splashes, and muted visual patterns created a steady, hypnotic cadence, a collective meditation on repetition, material responsiveness, and tactile observation. Observing this process is akin to watching moss ripple under a soft breeze or sunlight glint across slowly turning gears, a quiet, unhurried symphony of industrial rhythm, attentive human care, and the patient transformation of cloth. By 1890 CE in Europe and the United States, the slow hum of innovation reached the domestic realm with the introduction of electric irons, gradually replacing the traditional flat irons heated over stoves. These early devices, modest in size and weight, contained internal heating elements that slowly warmed metal plates, providing a more consistent, gentle heat than open flame or stovetop methods. Fabrics, once pressed with care over cumbersome, uneven surfaces, could now be smoothed with a quieter, less labor-intensive rhythm. Observers might notice the faint, steady glow of the metal, the gentle waft of warmth rising from freshly pressed linen, and the soft, tactile sensation of fibers yielding slowly under even pressure. Hands guided garments with measured care, adjusting angle and pace to maintain crispness without stressing threads. The slow integration of electricity into household routines produced a quiet, almost hypnotic cadence, the hum of current, the tactile feedback of pressing, and the subtle sheen of smoothed fibers creating a gentle, meditative rhythm. Over repeated use, fabrics maintained alignment and texture more predictably, while the act of ironing became an unobtrusive ritual of patient attention, a quiet dialogue between human touch, technology, and material response, akin to sunlight drifting across moss or feathers lazily settling in still air. In the United States around 1900 CE, the introduction of soap flakes for tub washing provided a soft, gentle alternative to coarser detergents, a subtle innovation in household fabric care. Thin, delicate flakes dissolved slowly in warm water, releasing cleansing compounds that penetrated fibers gradually, loosening oils, dirt, and residues without harsh abrasion. Hands moved fabrics with measured care, swirling, kneading, and pressing garments to ensure even contact, observing incremental changes in texture and cleanliness. The faint, pale water shimmered slightly as flakes dissolved, and a gentle, neutral scent of mild soap mingled with the warmth of submerged cloth. Each motion, pressing, lifting, and swirling, formed a quiet, repetitive rhythm, reinforcing tactile attention and patience. Over repeated immersions, fibers softened, dirt dispersed, and garments gradually emerged cleaner, demonstrating a careful interplay between chemistry, human touch, and material responsiveness. The process, entirely ordinary yet precise, encouraged a meditative engagement with subtle sensory feedback, reminiscent of sunlight filtering through mossy glades or the unhurried drift of feathers in still air, producing a serene choreography of cleaning, observation, and gentle care. By 1910 CE in the United States, household washing machines with built-in wringers became increasingly popular, offering a tactile, mechanical enhancement to the slow art of laundering. Clothes were submerged in soapy water, then guided between rubber or wooden rollers that gently squeezed moisture from fibers while preserving alignment and integrity. Hands attended closely, adjusting pressure, guiding seams and hems, and noting the pliability of damp threads. The soft creak of rollers, combined with the gentle splash of water and faint scent of soap, produced a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Observers could visualize the gradual transformation, limp, damp fabrics emerging firmer, cleaner, and more pliable, as mechanical assistance subtly amplified human touch. Each rotation reinforced a patient choreography, a quiet interaction of material, motion, and sensory perception. The process, while mundane in appearance, provided a meditative, almost tactile meditation on rhythm, repetition, and fiber response, as unhurried as moss undulating under soft sunlight or a feather drifting through still air. Around 1920 CE in Europe, soap powders began replacing flakes in domestic laundering, a small evolution in the convenience and consistency of household cleaning. These powders, fine and evenly granulated, dissolved gradually in warm water, dispersing cleansing agents throughout the liquid with patient evenness. Fabrics were immersed carefully, hands guiding threads through the solution, pressing and kneading to ensure thorough penetration, while loose soils rose slowly into the water. Observers might notice the subtle swirl of dissolved powder, the faint, neutral scent mingling with damp fibers, and the rhythmic, tactile cadence of hands attending to each garment. This gentle, repetitive engagement fostered a quiet, meditative interaction between human touch, chemistry, and textile response, producing incremental improvements in cleanliness and texture with each immersion. Over time, fibers softened and realigned, dirt diminished, and garments responded predictably to careful handling, the ordinary process becoming a hypnotic, sensory rhythm reminiscent of drifting feathers, sunlight on moss, or softly turning wooden gears, a serene orchestration of slow, attentive laundering. By 1930 CE in the United States, the mass production of electric washing machines made powered domestic laundry accessible to middle-class households, introducing a slow, mechanical cadence to everyday fabric care. Motors rotated drums or agitators within tubs filled with water and detergent, gently moving fabrics in repeated arcs that encouraged gradual loosening of oils, dirt, and residues. Hands guided cloths, adjusted load placement, and monitored consistency, observing the subtle shimmer of water, the gentle undulation of threads, and faint soapy scents rising from the liquid. The mechanical motion created a quiet rhythm, with steady rotation and water movement forming a meditative backdrop to tactile attention and sensory observation. Over repeated cycles, fibers softened, threads aligned, and garments emerged cleaner, benefiting from the harmonious interplay of human oversight, mechanical energy, and material responsiveness. The process, unhurried and precise, resembled a slow choreography, a hypnotic dialogue of hands, water, and movement, akin to sunlight diffusing through moss or feathers drifting over still water, producing calm and gentle reinforcement of textile care through incremental, attentive action. By 1940 CE in the United States, washing machines began to automate water filling and draining, introducing a quiet efficiency to the domestic laundry ritual. Fabrics were immersed and removed with minimal manual effort, while operators observed the gradual filling of tubs and the slow, rhythmic flow of water. Hands intervened gently to adjust placement or separate garments, maintaining fiber integrity as liquid rose and fell. Observers might notice subtle glimmers of moving water, the soft swish of submerged threads, and the tactile sensation of cloth responding to gradual saturation. The process, though seemingly mundane, encouraged patience and attentive observation, each cycle producing incremental improvements in cleanliness and softness. The gentle orchestration of automatic water movement, combined with careful human oversight, created a meditative rhythm, as slow and soothing as feathers drifting past mossy rocks or sunlight glancing across softly turning gears. By 1950 CE in Europe and the United States, the introduction of synthetic detergents marked a quiet revolution in laundry, offering non-soap compounds designed for more effective stain removal and fiber care. These powders and liquids dissolved evenly in water, releasing active cleaning agents that penetrated fabrics with patient consistency. Hands guided cloth through solution, pressing and kneading gently to ensure uniform contact, while loose dirt and oils migrated gradually into suspension. Observers might notice the faint clarity of water, the soft texture of treated fibers, and the rhythmic, tactile motions of human intervention. Over repeated cycles, textiles softened, aligned, and emerged cleaner, reflecting the careful interplay between chemistry, touch, and observation. The process, ordinary yet intricate, fostered a slow, hypnotic engagement with materials, akin to drifting feathers, sunlight filtering through moss, or gently turning wooden gears, producing a quiet, meditative rhythm in the art of attentive fabric care. In the United States around 1960 CE, washing machines with central agitators began to quietly refine the slow, habitual rhythm of domestic laundry. These vertical spindles, situated at the center of tubs, rotated gently, moving submerged fabrics in a circular or oscillating pattern that encouraged gradual loosening of dirt and oils from threads. Hands still intervened, guiding delicate garments to ensure even contact, adjusting placement with subtle care to prevent tangling or excessive friction. The water swirled softly, the slight hum of the motor forming a meditative cadence, while the tactile feedback of fibers pressing against the moving agitator informed the laundress of incremental cleaning progress. Observers might note the gentle shimmer of liquid, the faint, clean scent of soap dispersing, and the rhythmical, almost hypnotic oscillation of fabrics through water. Over repeated cycles, fibers relaxed, threads realigned, and garments emerged cleaner and subtly softened, demonstrating a delicate harmony between mechanical motion, human observation, and material responsiveness. The process, ordinary yet precise, created a quiet, sensory meditation akin to sunlight glancing over mossy stones or feathers drifting through still air, a patient choreography of touch, motion, and liquid acting in concert to maintain fabric integrity and cleanliness. By 1965 CE in Europe, front-loading machines gradually gained favor, offering a water-efficient alternative to traditional top-loading devices. The horizontal drums rotated slowly, tumbling fabrics in a controlled, gentle cascade, while gravity assisted in even exposure to soapy water. Hands guided garments minimally, observing subtle changes in texture and moisture, allowing the rhythmic tumbling to clean and soften fibers incrementally. The sound of water sloshing and metal drums turning, combined with the tactile feedback of fibers shifting gradually under immersion, created a calm, repetitive cadence, a sensory meditation for the careful observer. Water distribution and drum rotation were adjusted with deliberate attention to prevent tangling or uneven cleaning, reinforcing the subtle interplay of motion, gravity, and material responsiveness. Over successive cycles, garments emerged progressively cleaner, fibers aligned and softened, and residual soils dissipated into the gentle, circulating water. This slow, unhurried choreography of liquid, fabric, and mechanical rotation, though seemingly mundane, exemplified a quiet attention to efficiency, tactile perception, and patient observation, a rhythm as soothing as sunlight drifting over moss or the soft descent of a feather through still air. Around 1970 CE in the United States, washing machines with selectable hot and cold water settings introduced a new layer of deliberate control to domestic laundering. Operators could choose temperatures suited to the type of fabric or degree of soiling, guiding garments into water with a measured, thoughtful touch. Heat increased the efficacy of cleansing agents, encouraging oils and residues to loosen gradually, while colder water protected delicate threads from overstretching or fading. Observers might notice the faint shimmer of water adjusting to temperature, the subtle release of steam, and the slow tactile feedback as fabrics responded to immersion in gentle manipulation. This slow, sensory engagement fostered a careful rhythm, filling, soaking, kneading, and adjusting with unhurried precision, allowing fibers to react gently to both thermal and mechanical stimuli. The result was incremental, patient cleaning and fiber softening, a quiet meditation on attention, material responsiveness, and the subtle influence of temperature, reminiscent of sunlight glinting over moss or feathers drifting lazily through calm air, producing a gentle, hypnotic cadence in the ongoing ritual of fabric care. By 1975 CE in the United States, washing machines with optimized spin cycles introduced a controlled method for removing water from fabrics without causing undue stress to threads. Drums rotated at measured speeds, exerting centrifugal force that extracted moisture gradually, while fibers responded slowly to pressure and movement. Hands still monitored placement, adjusting delicate garments to avoid twisting or stretching, feeling subtle changes in dampness and pliability. Observers could perceive the gentle hum of rotation, the faint vibration of drums, and the soft shimmer of expelled water droplets, forming a meditative, rhythmic cadence. This incremental extraction improved subsequent drying efficiency and preserved fiber integrity, a slow choreography of motion, gravity, and tactile attention. Each cycle encouraged patient observation, attentive manipulation, and gentle engagement with materials, a quiet, unhurried interaction reminiscent of feathers drifting over mossy stones or sunlight softly tracing slowly turning gears. Over time, fabrics emerged cleaner, aligned, and optimally hydrated, the process revealing the delicate balance between force, care, and patience, a meditative orchestration of mechanics, fibers, and liquid responding together in measured harmony. In the United States around 1980 CE, high-efficiency detergents were developed for use in new washing machines designed to consume less water and energy. These concentrated formulas dissolved slowly, releasing cleaning agents in a gradual, patient manner, penetrating fabrics evenly without excessive sudsing or agitation. Hands guided garments gently, ensuring consistent contact with the solution while monitoring the softness, alignment, and dampness of fibers. The subtle clarity of water, combined with faint chemical aromas and tactile feedback, created a quiet, hypnotic rhythm of immersion, kneading, and observation. Over repeated washes, fibers softened, threads aligned, and soils dispersed incrementally, demonstrating the delicate interaction between chemical formulation, human touch, and fabric responsiveness. This ordinary yet precise practice encouraged a meditative engagement with materials, a slow sensory experience reminiscent of sunlight diffusing over moss or the gentle descent of a feather through calm air, producing a serene, hypnotic cadence in the otherwise mundane act of laundering. By 1985 CE in the United States, stain pretreatment sprays became widely available, offering a measured, gentle method for addressing localized soil before laundering. Sprays were applied carefully to affected areas, soaking fibers just enough to allow cleaning agents to act gradually, softening residues without overstressing threads. Hands pressed, dabbed, and monitored garments attentively, feeling subtle changes in texture and dampness, while observing the faint sheen of treated areas. This process encouraged slow, methodical observation and repetition, a tactile, meditative rhythm of touch, liquid, and material responsiveness. Over time, treated garments washed more evenly, fibers remained intact, and soils lifted incrementally, reflecting a quiet choreography between human intervention and chemical action, reminiscent of sunlight flickering across moss or feathers drifting lazily through still air, producing a hypnotic, unhurried cadence in the familiar ritual of fabric care. Around 1990 CE in Europe and the United States, washing machines with automatic detergent dispensers subtly transformed domestic routines, delivering measured amounts of soap at carefully timed intervals. Fabrics were immersed in water, guided gently by hands, while the slow release of detergent created a quiet, uniform cleansing effect. Observers might notice the faint ripple of water as powders or liquids dissolved, the tactile feedback of fibers softening gradually, and the subtle rhythm of immersion, agitation, and detergent integration forming a meditative cadence. Over successive cycles, threads aligned, fibers softened, and residual soils dispersed incrementally, demonstrating a delicate harmony between human guidance, chemical release, and material response. The process, entirely ordinary yet intricate, encouraged slow, attentive observation, a hypnotic interplay of touch, liquid, and motion, as soothing and patient as sunlight filtering through moss or a feather drifting lazily in still air. In Europe around 1995 CE, front-loading water-saving washing machines began to quietly transform the domestic ritual of laundering by carefully minimizing water and energy consumption. The horizontal drums rotated gently, tumbling fabrics in measured cascades that allowed water to coat fibers evenly, while gravity and motion worked in concert to release dirt slowly. Hands guided garments minimally, observing changes in texture and moisture with patient attention, feeling fibers respond to the gentle, repeated rotation. Observers might notice the soft swish of water circulating, the faint reflection of fabric gliding past drum surfaces, and the subtle tactile feedback as fibers shifted incrementally under immersion. The slow, unhurried rhythm encouraged careful attention to placement and load balance, producing gradual improvements in cleanliness and fabric softness. Over repeated cycles, fibers aligned, dirt dispersed, and garments emerged incrementally refreshed, demonstrating the delicate harmony between mechanical motion, human observation, and material responsiveness. This quiet choreography of liquid, fiber, and tumbling motion, though entirely ordinary, resembled sunlight filtering through moss or feathers drifting lazily in still air, a slow meditation on efficiency, patience, and tactile engagement with everyday materials. Around 2000 CE in Europe and the United States, washing machines incorporating steam cycles introduced a subtle innovation for sanitizing fabrics, combining moisture, heat, and gentle agitation. Steam permeated threads gradually, loosening oils, residues, and microbes without harsh mechanical force, while hands guided garments with careful attention to prevent overexposure or wrinkling. Observers might notice faint wisps rising within the drum, the gentle warmth suffusing fibers, and the tactile sensation of cloth responding to heat and moisture. Each cycle produced a slow, meditative rhythm, immersion, steaming, gentle agitation, and monitored removal, allowing materials to adjust gradually and evenly. Fabrics softened subtly, odors dissipated, and cleanliness improved incrementally, revealing the quiet interplay of thermal energy, fiber responsiveness, and careful human oversight. The process, ordinary in appearance yet intricate in effect, created a hypnotic cadence reminiscent of sunlight filtering through moss or the languid drift of feathers over still water, producing a soothing, unhurried rhythm in the ongoing ritual of fabric care. By 2005 CE in Europe and the United States, digital control washing machines introduced a layer of precision and quiet observation to the domestic laundry experience. Touchpads and digital displays allowed operators to select specific cycles, temperatures, and durations, regulating the rhythm of immersion, agitation, and rinse with measured, deliberate care. Hands placed garments with gentle attention, observing subtle shifts in moisture, alignment, and texture as machines executed programmed motions. The soft hum of motors, occasional clicks of digital interfaces, and faint swish of water formed a hypnotic cadence, a slow, meditative engagement between human oversight, mechanical precision, and fabric responsiveness. Over successive cycles, fibers softened, threads aligned, and garments gradually emerged cleaner, demonstrating the delicate orchestration of touch, technology, and material reaction. This process, though entirely mundane in outward appearance, encouraged slow observation and tactile patience, a quiet choreography reminiscent of sunlight glancing over moss or feathers drifting lazily through still air, producing a soothing, unhurried rhythm in the otherwise ordinary act of laundering. Around 2010 CE worldwide, the introduction of eco-friendly detergents, biodegradable, phosphate-free formulations, offered a subtle, environmentally conscious refinement to the domestic washing ritual. These gentle compounds dissolved gradually in water, penetrating fibers with slow, patient thoroughness, lifting oils and dirt while minimizing chemical residues and environmental impact. Hands guided garments with measured care, ensuring even exposure while observing subtle shifts in texture, pliability, and moisture. The faint clarity of water, combined with gentle, natural scents and soft tactile feedback, produced a hypnotic, meditative rhythm, immersion, kneading, gentle agitation, and observation unfolding slowly and deliberately. Over repeated washes, fabrics softened, threads realigned, and soils dissipated incrementally, illustrating a careful interplay between chemistry, human attention, and material responsiveness. The ordinary act of laundering became a serene meditation, a slow choreography of fibers, liquid, and touch, reminiscent of sunlight filtering over moss or feathers drifting through still, quiet air, producing a soothing, unhurried cadence that encouraged patient observation and tactile mindfulness. By 2012 worldwide, smart washing machines introduced a quiet, connected intelligence to domestic laundry, allowing operators to control cycles via Wi-Fi or mobile applications. Machines executed pre-programmed routines with gentle precision, adjusting water levels, temperatures, and agitation patterns while monitoring load balance and cycle progress. Hands intervened minimally, placing garments with deliberate attention, feeling fibers respond gradually to immersion, rotation, and soap dispersion. Observers could note the faint whir of motors, the subtle ripple of water, and the soft tactile feedback of fabrics aligning under controlled motion, producing a hypnotic rhythm of interaction between human oversight, digital programming, and material responsiveness. Over repeated cycles, textiles softened, soils dispersed, and threads aligned incrementally, illustrating a meditative dialogue between technology, human care, and fiber behavior. This process, ordinary in outward appearance yet intricate in sensory experience, resembled sunlight diffusing over moss or the gentle descent of feathers through still air, creating a slow, unhurried cadence in the quiet art of attentive fabric care. In Europe and the United States around 2015, cold wash detergent concentrates offered a measured, energy-conscious refinement to domestic laundering, formulated specifically to function effectively in lower temperatures. These concentrated agents dissolved slowly, gradually penetrating fibers while preserving color, texture, and moisture, allowing dirt and oils to lift without the additional thermal energy of warm or hot water. Hands guided garments gently, monitoring the pliability, dampness, and alignment of threads, while observing subtle visual cues such as the soft shimmer of liquid and the slow movement of cloth through solution. Each step, immersion, kneading, gentle agitation, and rinsing, formed a quiet, meditative rhythm, reinforcing tactile awareness and patient observation. Over repeated cycles, fabrics softened incrementally, soils dispersed gradually, and garments emerged clean and aligned, reflecting a careful interplay of chemical formulation, human touch, and material responsiveness. The entire process, seemingly ordinary yet intricate, encouraged a slow, hypnotic engagement with the senses, reminiscent of sunlight glancing over moss or feathers drifting lazily through calm air, producing a serene, unhurried cadence in the ongoing, attentive ritual of fabric care. In the gentle hush of 2016 worldwide, high-efficiency front-loading washing machines began to subtly transform the domestic rhythm of laundering, emphasizing minimal water and energy use in a way that encouraged quiet observation and meditative patience. The horizontal drums rotated in measured, almost hypnotic cascades, allowing fabrics to tumble slowly while gravity encouraged uniform exposure to cleaning solution, the liquid gliding over threads like sunlight across mossy forest floors. Hands intervened with tender care, repositioning garments so every fold and seam could soak evenly, observing how fibers responded incrementally to the gentle agitation. Observers might note the faint hum of motors, the soft shimmer of water, and the tactile feedback as textiles gradually released soil and absorbed cleansing agents, a sensory interplay that unfolded at its own unhurried pace. Each rotation encouraged a rhythm both mechanical and contemplative, with threads aligning, dirt dispersing gradually, and garments emerging incrementally refreshed, softly conditioned, and subtly altered in texture. Over multiple cycles, the interaction between liquid, fabric, and human oversight produced a quiet choreography of motion, gravity, and attentive care, reinforcing the meditative, almost ceremonial quality of this domestic task. The experience resembles the slow drift of feathers through still air, or sunlight glancing lazily over moss, offering a hypnotic cadence that transforms an ordinary, mundane chore into a soothing and gentle ritual, a quiet engagement with material, motion, and time itself. In the soft unfolding of 2017 CE worldwide, app-controlled laundry devices introduced an added layer of digital mediation, quietly altering the tactile rhythm of fabric care while enabling remote management. Operators could schedule cycles, adjust temperatures, or monitor progress through gentle taps on smartphone interfaces, observing subtle visual cues and listening for faint operational sounds with minimal direct intervention. Fabrics were handled thoughtfully, placed so that water and detergent could interact evenly with threads, responding incrementally to gentle tumbling and vibration. The combined orchestration of digital commands, mechanical motion, and fiber responsiveness created an unhurried cadence that allowed garments to emerge clean and orderly, softening slightly with each rotation. Over repeated cycles, the tactile feedback of fibers against drum surfaces and the gentle swish of water reinforced a meditative, sensory awareness, cultivating patience and mindfulness. Observers might notice the faint glimmer of liquid reflecting light, the soft undulation of textiles within the drum, and the gradual alignment of fibers as detergents penetrated threads, all forming a quiet, hypnotic rhythm that mirrors the slow descent of feathers over moss or sunlight glancing through turning leaves, encouraging a serene engagement with the mundane yet remarkably intricate act of laundering. During 2018 CE worldwide, low-temperature steam sanitizing cycles offered a remarkably gentle, almost imperceptible method of cleaning delicate fabrics, emphasizing gradual penetration over forceful agitation. Steam rose slowly within enclosed drums, saturating threads incrementally, loosening oils, residues, and microbial particles without mechanical strain. Hands guided garments with soft attentiveness, feeling fibers respond gradually to heat and moisture, noting subtle changes in pliability and dampness. Observers could perceive delicate wisps of vapor swirling inside the drum, the faint warmth diffusing across fibers, and the gentle interaction between liquid, thermal energy, and material structure. Each step, immersion, steaming, light agitation, and attentive observation, unfolded with measured care, producing incremental improvements in softness, cleanliness, and fiber alignment. Over repeated cycles, textiles subtly strengthened or softened in response to the gentle forces, while minor odors dissipated, leaving garments perceptibly refreshed. The rhythm of these cycles created a hypnotic, meditative cadence, reminiscent of sunlight drifting across mossy terrain or feathers falling slowly through still air, encouraging patient observation and tactile mindfulness. Even though outwardly mundane, this process revealed the quiet, slow interaction between thermal energy, moisture, and attentive human oversight, transforming routine laundering into a gentle, sensory meditation on fibers, water, and time. In the unfolding of 2019 CE worldwide, all-in-one pods introduced a pre-measured, highly structured approach to laundering, combining detergent, softener, and bleach in single, compact units. Garments were immersed in water with deliberate care, allowing the concentrated contents of the pods to dissolve gradually, permeating fibers evenly and incrementally. Hands guided fabrics attentively, feeling subtle shifts in texture, moisture absorption, and thread alignment as chemical agents worked slowly and deliberately, lifting dirt, softening fibers, and lightly whitening surfaces. Observers might notice the faint shimmer of dissolving pods, the gentle swirl of liquid, and the tactile feedback of fibers responding to slow chemical penetration, creating a quiet, hypnotic rhythm. Over successive cycles, fabrics became progressively cleaner, smoother, and subtly brighter, demonstrating the careful balance between formulation, motion, and human attentiveness. The process encouraged patient observation of incremental changes, how threads aligned, surfaces softened, and water moved in subtle currents around fibers. This slow, deliberate choreography, entirely ordinary in outward appearance yet rich in sensory detail, mirrors the gentle descent of feathers over moss or sunlight glancing over turning gears, producing a soothing, unhurried cadence in the otherwise mundane task of fabric care. By the year 2020 CE worldwide, AI-powered washing machines introduced a quietly intelligent dimension to laundering, detecting fabric types and automatically optimizing cycles with gentle precision. Hands placed garments softly, guiding fibers into drum space while observing their subtle interactions with water, detergent, and motion. The machines adjusted agitation, rotation speed, and cycle duration incrementally, responding to thread thickness, weave density, and moisture content with unobtrusive attentiveness. Observers might notice faint sensor hums, ripples of water across textiles, and the incremental alignment of fibers as fabrics responded to algorithmic care. Over repeated cycles, soils dispersed gradually, fibers softened and realigned, and garments emerged refreshed without aggressive intervention. The rhythmic interplay of artificial intelligence, mechanical motion, and human observation produced a slow, meditative cadence, emphasizing patient attentiveness and gradual transformation. This quiet orchestration resembled sunlight filtering over moss or feathers drifting lazily through still air, inviting calm, unhurried observation. The process encouraged an appreciation for incremental change, subtle sensory feedback, and the delicate balance between technology, human touch, and material responsiveness, turning a seemingly mundane domestic chore into a gentle, hypnotic, almost ceremonial act of fabric care. During 2021 CE worldwide, waterless laundry innovations, such as ultrasonic or ozone-based systems, emerged to gently cleanse fabrics without the intervention of conventional water immersion. Fibers were exposed to oscillating sound waves or reactive ozone gases that loosened dirt and oil slowly, requiring delicate placement and monitoring to ensure even treatment. Observers might notice subtle vibrations traveling through fabric, the faint shimmer of fibers, and the quiet, gradual chemical interactions at work. Each cycle unfolded with deliberate pace, treatment, careful observation, and incremental softening, creating subtle improvements in cleanliness and texture. Over repeated uses, fibers adjusted gradually, impurities dispersed, and garments became softer while maintaining structural integrity. The process encouraged patient observation, tactile awareness, and careful attention to detail. The quiet rhythm of these cycles resembled sunlight filtering over moss or feathers drifting slowly through calm air, producing a hypnotic, unhurried cadence that emphasized the serene, meditative engagement between material transformation, chemical application, and human oversight, transforming an ordinary, otherwise mundane task into a gentle ritual of mindful fabric care. In 2022 CE worldwide, sustainable laundry methods emphasized the use of biodegradable detergents, energy-saving machines, and minimal water usage, creating a subtle, conscientious rhythm in domestic laundering. Fabrics gradually responded to gentle chemical solutions, releasing soils incrementally and absorbing moisture in a measured, even manner. Hands guided garments softly, observing thread alignment, tactile response, and subtle shifts in moisture while monitoring the ongoing, unhurried cleaning process. Over successive cycles, fibers softened, impurities dissipated, and garments emerged refreshed, demonstrating the delicate interplay of chemical composition, mechanical movement, and human attentiveness. Observers might notice faint ripples of water over threads, the gradual hum of motors, and incremental alignment of fibers, producing a hypnotic, meditative rhythm. The process encouraged patient observation and tactile mindfulness, creating a quiet, gentle choreography of motion, liquid, and fiber, reminiscent of sunlight glinting over moss or feathers drifting lazily through still air. Even the most ordinary, mundane aspects of laundering gained a serene, unhurried quality, inviting the mind to settle into calm attentiveness, appreciating the slow, incremental transformations of fabric under conscientious, sustainable care. By 2023 CE worldwide, robotic laundry folders quietly added an automated, gentle choreography to the mundane task of folding garments after washing. Machines lifted, aligned, and manipulated fabrics with careful precision, emulating human hands while maintaining consistent, soft movements. Observers might notice the faint brushing of textiles, the slow, deliberate rotation of mechanical arms, and the gradual settling of fibers into neatly aligned folds, producing a calm, rhythmic progression that echoed patience and repetition. Over time, each cycle created incremental improvements in order, alignment, and fiber relaxation, subtly shaping fabrics without abrupt motion. The quiet rhythm of this process, combined with the soft sound of fabric brushing against machinery, created a hypnotic cadence, reminiscent of sunlight glancing across moss or feathers drifting through still air. By engaging with this automation, the ordinary act of folding transformed into a meditative, tactile experience, revealing subtle sensory details and encouraging slow, attentive observation of the ordinary, emphasizing the harmonious interplay of material, movement, and human-engineered guidance. During 2024 CE worldwide, washing machines integrated with smart home systems allowed subtle, remote management of laundry routines, adjusting efficiency, monitoring cycles, and optimizing resource usage with minimal human intervention. Hands intervened softly, placing garments attentively, observing fibers as they responded to water, detergent, and motion, while sensors and automated controls subtly adjusted agitation and temperature. Observers might notice faint hums of motors, soft ripples of water across threads, and gradual alignment of fibers, producing a slow, unhurried cadence. Over successive cycles, fabrics softened, soils dispersed, and threads aligned incrementally, creating a serene, hypnotic rhythm in the domestic routine of laundering. The integration with interconnected smart systems allowed a quiet, meditative observation of incremental changes, the ordinary act of cleaning elevated to a gentle, attentive ritual reminiscent of sunlight filtering over moss or feathers drifting lazily through still air, inviting the mind to settle in calm appreciation of slow, subtle transformations in fabric care. In the quiet unfolding of 2025 CE, AI-powered washing machines continued to refine the domestic laundering experience with an almost imperceptible intelligence. They detected fabric types, soil levels, and moisture content to optimize cycles automatically. Hands placed garments gently, observing subtle fiber responses as the machine adjusted agitation, water temperature, and cycle length with incremental precision. Observers might notice the soft hum of sensors, ripples of water through threads, and the gradual alignment of fibers. Each rotation reinforced cleanliness and texture, and over repeated cycles, fabrics softened, soils dispersed, and fibers responded slowly yet predictably, creating a serene, meditative rhythm. The interaction between artificial intelligence, human attention, and fabric responsiveness produced a quiet choreography reminiscent of sunlight drifting across moss or feathers floating gently through still air. The ordinary act of laundering transformed into a hypnotic, unhurried ritual. Steam cabinets for garment refreshing emerged as a delicate, almost imperceptible adjunct to domestic fabric care. They offered gentle cleaning and a wrinkling without full washing. Garments were hung thoughtfully inside the cabinets, exposed to low-pressure steam that permeated threads gradually, loosening residual odors, softening fibers, and gently aligning folds. Observers noticed faint wisps of vapor curling around fibers, subtle warmth diffusing evenly, and the tactile feedback of threads yielding slowly to moisture. Each cycle unfolded with patience, steaming, occasional gentle air circulation, and attentive observation. This produced incremental freshness and subtle texture enhancement, the soft cadence resembling sunlight glancing over moss or feathers drifting through still air, a quiet, hypnotic rhythm in fabric care emphasizing gradual transformation over forceful intervention. Microplastic filtration devices were introduced into laundering routines to mitigate environmental impact. They captured tiny synthetic fibers shed during washing before they entered waterways. Water flowed through fine meshes or membranes with delicate precision, gradually straining microscopic particles while allowing fabrics to move freely. Hands observed garments attentively, noting subtle changes in fiber behavior as liquids passed through filters and occasionally emptied collected residues. The slow, repetitive process of filtration created a hypnotic, meditative rhythm emphasizing environmental consciousness and quiet attention to detail. Observers noticed the gentle hum of water, faint shimmers of trapped particles, and the incremental preservation of both textile and ecological health, a soft choreography akin to feathers drifting over moss or sunlight glinting on still surfaces. Eco-friendly laundry detergents achieved widespread use, formulated to biodegrade readily while cleaning fabrics effectively. Detergent molecules dissolved slowly, interacting with fibers incrementally to remove soils without harsh residues. Hands guided garments carefully, feeling fibers respond gradually to gentle chemical action while observing subtle changes in texture and moisture absorption. Over successive cycles, fabrics became progressively cleaner and softly conditioned, with the faint scent of natural ingredients wafting softly. The rhythm of dissolution, penetration, and fiber response created a quiet, meditative cadence, a hypnotic, unhurried choreography reminiscent of sunlight filtering through moss or feathers drifting lazily through still air. This represented gentle attention to both domestic and environmental care. Smart laundry systems interconnected machines, apps, and household routines to coordinate fabric care efficiently and attentively. Garments were placed gently as sensors, algorithms, and remote interfaces orchestrated water flow, agitation, and temperature with subtle precision. Observers noticed the soft hum of integrated systems, incremental changes in fiber alignment, and gentle ripples of water responding to digital control. Each cycle unfolded with slow, deliberate care, producing fabrics that softened, soils dispersed gradually, and threads aligned. The quiet, unhurried rhythm of smart systems resembled sunlight drifting over moss or feathers floating gently through still air, creating a hypnotic, meditative engagement with domestic laundering. Sustainable packaging solutions for laundry products became increasingly common, reducing waste while maintaining usability and protection for detergents, pods, and softeners. Packaging materials were carefully chosen for biodegradability, minimal chemical interaction, and tactile ease of use. Observers noticed the soft rustle of thin cardboard, the gentle slide of pods into containers, and the measured precision of labeling and sealing processes. The slow, repetitive attention to design, handling, and material selection created a quiet, meditative rhythm, emphasizing sustainability, care, and tactile observation. The process resembled the soft descent of feathers over moss or sunlight glancing across slowly turning gears, a gentle, hypnotic choreography of domestic and environmental mindfulness. As the gentle cadence of laundering fades into quiet stillness, and the subtle rhythms of water, fibers, and soft machinery settle into a calm hush, let your mind rest alongside these slow, deliberate motions. Imagine the faint scent of soap, steam, and clean fabrics lingering softly in the air, mingling with the delicate traces of moss and sunlight, a quiet reminder of the ordinary beauty in unhurried, careful attention. If your eyes are closed, if your thoughts are drifting, then my job here is done for today. Thank you for spending this unremarkable moment with me. You have listened to The Sleepy Sloth, where uninteresting things become the softest lullabies.